And we're back with more News Talk Saga 960. So very glad you could join us on this edition of the Marc Patrone Show. Boy, the government loves to spend money on consultants, don't they? And we're not talking about, modest amounts of cash. This tweet by Laurie Goldstein over at the Toronto Sun: Trudeau government has increased spending on consultants by, get this, 40% to $17.7 billion. On consultants. Really? I mean, we have a huge number of people who work for government. Why don't you just get them to do it since they're on the payroll anyway? Trudeau government has increased spending on consultants by 40% to $17.7 billion versus $10.4 billion in 2015. That's when Trudeau came in promising that the budget would balance itself, and increased public service by 50,000 people. This is how you wreck a country. This is how you bankrupt a country. From 342,000 to 391,000 people. These people are insane. Anyway, there was a story in the National Post, a column by John Iveson: growing spending on consultants by ballooning public service is the real scandal. Well, let's bring in Andy Lee, because Andy, of course, is a professional when it comes to crunching numbers. And she says it gets even worse when you look at what we're paying the Chinese as well as having people both on the payroll and working as consultants. So what? We're paying them a salary, but we're also giving them on top of that a consulting fee. This is insane. It's lunacy. Andy, welcome to the show.
Yeah. Hi, Mark. It's good to be back.
Well, Happy New Year as well.
Yes, Happy New Year indeed. Yeah. So a lot of hard looking is, there's a microscope on consultancy right now. Consultancy did balloon, especially during the pandemic. And, we saw the public service grow. Everybody, touted about, Canada's recovery and a lot of that. But a lot of those jobs were recovered in the private sector, and it was the government that was hovering them. And so I started looking through public accounts, and those were all available and things like that. And, looking into sort of the staffing agencies. And it really is a scandal when you look at how much money is going out the door. And even I haven't calculated it yet, is just being spent on consultants just to staff the federal government. And I kind of fell into this looking at ArriveCan contracts, because I was looking at some of the contractors that got the ArriveCan application contract. And we know that some of those people didn't, do any in-house work. They were just simply consultants who went on to hire more consultants, and those contracts ballooned. And, there's a lot more of that. So I did find one company who was given an ArriveCan application. It doesn't seem like they do any in-house work. This is aside from GC Strategies. That was the one that was pulled up in front of committee. And so this company that I found, and I'm not going to tell their name yet because I'm going to write a big story on it. It's really, really interesting. So a lot of their staff members have worked, or some of them currently still work for the federal government. So what's happened here is we have federal employees who work at another consultant agency receiving federal contracts. And again, they don't do any in-house work. So the funny thing is they have another company that most of them also work at, which does, provide employees. So it's kind of like, they get a contract from the government, and they then refer it to their own staffing company, and then their own staffing company outsources it to their other subsidiary company that actually provides employees. So it's just, it's just this grifter mill that turns around, and there's a lot of it. Like I said, I don't know how many millions of dollars we spend every year on consultants just to staff the federal government, but it's in the millions and millions and millions of dollars. It's huge. There's a lot of these companies. The government really isn't doing their own legwork when it comes to, staffing their own positions. Most of the times they're turning to these agencies and things like that to do it for them. And I mean, to be fair, they haven't hired a lot of employees. I think the PPO officer in his report said that they hire about 10,000 new federal employees are hired a year. But they're not doing their own hiring. What they're doing is they're just turning around and contracting it out to staffing agencies, who then subcontract it out and get the positions filled. And the people doing this contracting, it's really, really funny. Like, a lot of them don't have HR backgrounds. This one company I was looking at, they are filled with ex-massage therapists, vet techs, Canadian Tire cashiers and things like that. So it's not like they're qualified really to be staffing these positions. So it's really, really interesting how this, how this is playing out. And it's really, really good that this is in the public eye, because this consulting is got to stop, right? It's a money sucker. And every time that these contracts get put out, you just see them be amended, and they grow and they grow and they grow, right? Because there's just a middleman taking the money. I mean, with GC Strategy, so that was the company that I said, hold on here. These guys got like, $9 million, and, they don't even have a business address. They're just like living out of a house somewhere in Ottawa. Well, how come they got this much money? I mean, when they got pulled up in front of committee, it was shown that, and they said that this was fair, that they did subcontract it out. They weren't going to give out those names for the work done. And they said that they took home like over $1 million for that, right? Just being the middleman. So this has got to stop.
This is absolute lunacy. We're pushing the debt of the country to what, $1.5 trillion. These people just can't burn money fast enough. The leader of the Conservative Party, this is straight out of John Ivison's piece of the National Post. The leader of the Conservative Party hasn't committed himself to much, but that's a pretty definitive promise, meaning a Pierre Poilievre government would reduce the spending on third-party consultants that Ottawa's own estimates suggest rose to $17.7 billion. Governments should, of course, be judged by their actions, not their intentions. In the 2015 Liberal election platform, Justin Trudeau promised to save billions by reducing the use of external consultants. Yeah, but Justin is a liar. I mean, he also promised that the 2015 election would be the last, first past the post type election. I mean, he made all sorts of promises that were just bald-faced lies. So I don't think you can try to suggest that Poilievre's promises would be kind of the same as Trudeau's, because they're politicians and they all make promises. I don't know if it would be even possible for Poilievre to be as big a liar as Justin Trudeau. $17.7 billion. Do we know what these consultants do?
From what I can see, what they do is a lot of them, like this one that I'm looking at, it has a very, mud front. I sent there to look at it. It used to be a foot joint. I mean, that's fine, right? The cutbacks, if you can run from home, that's okay. But again, I think that, when you're giving out these multi-million-dollar contracts, they should be going first and foremost to companies that do in-house work. Because that way we know that the work is being done by a Canadian company, and we're supporting a Canadian company. The other weird thing about these companies is, or this particular company is, he also runs another consulting and staffing company in the United States. So I'm kind of like, well, did we just give contract to somebody so that he can turn around and give it to his other company in the US and outsource this to people who are doing work in the US? And they don't have a business address in the United States either. That business address that's listed actually leads to a Chicago penthouse. So, I've got a lot of questions, but I mean, this is the sort of thing that goes on, right? And like I said, it's really businesses that are losing out. I mean, when we saw in the Arrive Can contracts, is that a lot of businesses came forward and said, we could have built this app, right? So why did the government contract out to, 20 companies who then subcontracted out, and made the cost balloon from a couple of $1 million to $54 million? I mean, it's good work if you can get it, right? And like a lot of these people,
the Liberals take care of their own, that's for sure. If you're connected to this government, you're getting fat. I also want to ask you about your tweet here. Can somebody or someone explain to me why taxpayers collectively paid the Bank of China? I mean, is it out of the realm of possibility that we have a prime minister who's really in the pocket of Xi Jinping? Explain to me why taxpayers collectively paid the Bank of China, the Diplomatic Service Bureau in Shanghai, and the service of foreign establishments in Guangdong over $15 million last year for consulting for temporary staffing solutions for Global Affairs Canada. What the hell is this?
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out. I have to make some phone calls. I'm always running behind, right? But yeah, when I was going through, I was actually looking for temp staffing agencies and things like that. So I was going through public accounts. And I just came across this by chance, sort of. I was like, what's going on here? So this is the public account spending for Global Affairs Canada. This is what they've spent on temporary health services. Temporary health services are, used to temporarily fill staffing positions within the federal government. Specifically within the National Capital Region. That's what's listed on their website anyways. And so it turns out that it looks like we've been paying, the Bank of China and some other state-owned entities money for several years, not just this year. It goes back quite a while, actually, to provide. I'm a little bit unsure as to what solutions they're providing. To be honest, but like I said, this is what's displayed on the public account. So I have a lot of questions. If we are paying, state-owned entities, Chinese state-owned entities, funds to help staff the government of Canada, specifically Global Affairs Canada, I have a lot of questions about that and how that works. And, it would be no surprise that obviously they would be driving foreign policy in a pro-Beijing manner. So, a lot of it is very, very, very strange. And I'm expecting this to, come up a little bit more and be called into question. And not only that, it's a lot. It wasn't just like it's $1 million. It's a lot of money that went $1 million a year, right? And this has been going on for years and years. That's quite a bit.
People are such
When
crooks.
you
They are such criminals.
When you looked at so I looked at all the government agencies. I didn't add them all up because this is like hundreds of pages, right, of these accounts that I'm going through. But it looked like basically this one, payment that's going to China is, basically more than almost every department combined spent on temporary staffing solutions, except for the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense spends quite a bit, but it makes sense that they would be, looking to fill positions and things like that and help in staffing because they're a massive department with a massive budget. But so, I mean, it's a big chunk of money. And, where is it going and what are they doing? And why does the Bank of China have anything? What does the Bank of China have anything to do with Global Affairs Canada at all? Really? I'm
probably infiltrated it. I mean, that's one thing. But I also got to ask you, while I got you on here, you obviously saw this. Chrystia Freeland was asked about her request. I mean, it's not a request. I guess it's gone through the budget already. $2 billion in tax money to invest in a company that doesn't even exist. This tweet, one can only speculate which of her friends the funds were for. Thankfully, the senator very clearly demonstrates how BS doesn't always baffle brains. Let's listen.
Division 1 on the Canada Growth Fund. And I have some concerns about that section of the bill. It's going to provide $2 billion to you as minister to buy shares in a corporation which does not exist.
Okay.
Only in Canada,
right? What's that?
Only in Canada, right? Like,
oh my gosh. Okay, let's fast forward over to Chrystia, who dances around this thing without even answering the question. Thank you for asking this question. I don't have an answer.
And thank you for focusing on what I actually believe is one of the most important elements of this. Was introduced in the budget and elaborated on in the fall economic statement, and something that I see as one of the most important elements of our green transition. The Canada Growth Fund will actually be capitalized at $15 billion. And the objective is for that government money to pull in private capital at a ratio of at least 3-1.
Okay, so she expects that there are private companies that are going to just jump all over this. I mean, these companies are not going to enter into a failed agreement with the government unless they want to lose money. I think they might come in if they're guaranteed not to lose money. What do you think?
Well, I mean, this is just deja vu because we've heard this before, and we've heard it in the Canada Infrastructure Bank, right? That was the promise with the Canada Infrastructure Bank, is we were going to get, private investors were going to get, I think, $3 back for every dollar invested. And, that never happened. And the projects haven't been completed, right? They're still in the works. So I just think that this is just another infrastructure bank. That's my thoughts about this, is, this is just a place where private investors are going to go in and suck out, taxpayer funds and taxpayer benefits, and it's just this gristmill, right? I looked into this in the budget when it initially came in. I wish I could find my own tweet because I went through it quite in detail, but there's a lot of these incentives in the budget, and there's a lot of vagueness about how these funds are going to be used and things like that. Some of these funds, they're saying, well, this money is going to be reinvested in, in green projects, that the government sees suitable and things like that. That's where the money's going to go. And it's sort of like, well, I mean, how do we know that these are going to good projects and not just to your friends and things that interest you? It's really, really funny. Everybody should go online. I have to post this because there's actually input that you can put on the Government of Canada's website right now for budget 2023. They want your ideas, right? But they don't really want your ideas at all. What they want
They don't want my ideas. I can guarantee you that.
Because if you go in this survey, it's so funny. And when you go in, right, they'll ask you, what do you think would be good for economic growth? And they list like 7 things. And the first 5 are like green incentives that will do nothing for economic growth. There's nothing about natural resources. There's nothing about LNG, right? There's nothing about that. It's like,
no.
We invest in, EV batteries? Should we invest in, wind turbines? So they really don't want your ideas because they don't give you an opportunity to actually put your ideas out there. They just want you to pick their ideas so that they can go forward in their next budget and say, well, Canadians responded and here's what they said. They said that they like our ideas and these are the ideas, right? But they don't really give you any chance to give any real input as to what we think would
No,
help.
what they're saying is they don't want your ideas, but they have to look like they're at least trying to gauge what the public opinion is.
There's nothing in there about LNG development and energy.
Of course not. Of course not. No, that would because that's something that makes money. No, these people, let's get this straight. The Trudeau regime is destroying Canada and they're doing it on purpose and they've been paid off to do it. But let's hear this clip from Pierre Poilievre, whom I think does a pretty good job summing up the attitude of the Liberals. We were talking about consultants, the consultant class. This tweet by Concerned Canadian, as I stated in a prior tweet, I haven't given up on Canada. Our best days are still ahead. So this is the quote, I believe, either from Poilievre or maybe this individual. But let's hear Poilievre's thoughts about how so much money, so much of the people's money is being directed to this class of individuals, lobbyists, consultants, and so forth.
The other day, Justin Trudeau was at a big party, 2,000 wealthy Liberal lobbyists in the nation's capital, saying that we should stop all the complaining. Well, everybody in that room has nothing to complain about. They're doing very well.
That's
it's
for
been an
sure.
all-you-can-eat buffet for the lobbyists and the insiders in Ottawa. But for the average person who's struggling to make their mortgage payments that have gone up by $800 or $900 a month, that they're living in a different world. So sure, let's tell people to be more civil, but let's, as political leaders, let's actually try to solve the problems that have upset and angered and hurt people so badly. It is our job to turn that hurt into hope, to transform it into something better. My parents taught me that in Canada, it didn't matter where I came from, but where I was going. Didn't matter who I knew, but what I could do. That's the country I want my kids to inherit. So let's make this a place where people feel like their hard work pays off, where they're respected, where their leaders don't talk down to them and point fingers at them, but rather lift them up, where we have a prime minister that actually brings people together and gives them the hope that tomorrow can be better than today. I think that is the real problem that we need to solve, and it's the one I will solve as prime minister.
All right. I think he does a pretty good job there of putting forth a vision of a country that has a prime minister that actually listens to people. But I'm not interested in being any more civil than I already am. And I'm not very civil in dealing with this slimeball prime minister and his little merry band of corrupt individuals who are wrecking this country and tearing it down. I'm not interested in being civil because they're slimeballs and I think they belong in prison. And if that makes me sound uncivil, I don't really care. But I would say that if you want to be prime minister like Poilievre does, I think he does a pretty good job there. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, we've probably come to the point where we have to start looking at the stuff and trimming the fat, right? I mean, government has just gotten so big and bloated, and that's not necessarily a problem, but our services haven't improved, right? I mean, our services have all been degraded. We're looking at healthcare is terrible, right? Our our public transit's terrible. There's a transit committee going on right now. We have huge messes at the border still, the passport offices. So, it's not like we've gotten value for our money. The more bloated we've created, that made the system, the worse our services have degraded. So, at some point you have to say, whoa, 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 and start trimming the fat. So, I'm really looking forward to more people looking into this consulting business, because it's just a black hole of money. And again, a lot of it is you don't get access. You don't really know what work was done. You don't know if it was subcontracted out. You don't even know if those subcontracts went to people in your country and benefited, Canadian companies and things like that. And of course, now we're going to be looking at McKinsey. McKinsey is a funny story. That's, a cast of itself.
Liberal connected consultant firm. Yeah.
Yeah. And so actually funny, when I was going through those public accounts and I found the Bank of China listed as being a consultant, Dominic Barton is also listed in there independently, which is kind of weird because he was working for the government, right? He was an ambassador to China.
Yeah.
So if you look through those public accounts, he received an extra $150,000 from Global Affairs Canada. But we don't know why. But
I'm pretty sure that these people are just throwing as much money as they possibly can to their friends because they know it's slipping away.
well,
Andy, when you think you're at the back end, it's like we've got this much time left. How much can we steal from the people of the country? I want to draw your attention to this response to what you said. This is no CCP, fringe minority deplorable. They don't hire HR, especially CPHR. I'm not sure what that acronym is, so that they can manipulate the consultants to do more, to do what they want. Hiring CCP-related persons allows for communist infiltration and spying. These are steps in bringing in the New World Order to Canada and the world. What do you think of that? I think you're frozen a little bit, Andy, but I think that response is probably enough to freeze you. Did you hear that?
I did. Yeah. That's one of my great little followers.
Okay.
So yeah, like I said, this wasn't something new, but I think if we're going to be looking at consultants, this is, something that I could look at right now and say, hey, I can save $15 million right off the bat. Let's not let the Bank of China have anything to do with, staffing services and providing consulting services to Canadians, right? I'm like, bam, right there, right? If we want to start chopping this down, I could get rid of 15 million bucks off the bat. That'd be really, really easy. So yeah, I'd like to know what they're doing. I think that's fair. And I don't think that they should have anything to do with staffing and consultancy in Global Affairs Canada, right? I just don't think that should be going on. Maybe that would have been acceptable, like 10 years ago. But I think that, the way that the Xi Jinping regime has gone in China and what we've seen is extremely concerning. They're a genocidal state that's extremely repressive, right? They're not only not moving forward in democracy, they're taking a step back in time. They're moving backward in democracy. So, for whatever reason, obviously this relationship was initiated, but I think it's time to have a look at that and say, no, let's sever that tie right off the bat. It's pretty unacceptable at this, point in the game, I think, to have that sort of a relationship with Global Affairs Canada.
Yeah, especially as the West is watching China inch closer to war with Taiwan. We're seeing more and more aggression on the part of the Chinese military, encroaching regularly into Taiwanese airspace. And you just can't help but think that eventually that invasion is going to happen, and that it could engulf possibly the entire region, with Japan, of course, America, a major player, Australia, North Korea, South Korea. This could be devastating. And so when you're looking at what's happening on the global in the geopolitical scheme of things, and the possible military confrontation ahead, why would you throw money at Chinese consultants? It doesn't make any sense to me, but then again, I'm not on the take for the Chinese.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think that we should start looking at all these, and I think we have to review not just McKinsey, but like I said, having gone through these, there's a lot of these consultant agencies going on, and it's questionable whether they do their in-house work or they're just passing it off to another group that contracts it out or can provide the services. We really have to get rid of those middlemen because it's just bleeding cash. And again, you see these contracts go out and be accepted, and then you'll see amendments, right? The amendments are often for large amounts of money, right? It's for millions of dollars more, and it's because initially the initial consultants that got the contract agreed to the terms, but then when they went and tried to subcontract it out, the price got inflated, and then the contract price got amended and got inflated as well, right? So like I said, it's good work if you can get it. I mean, I can certainly sit here and I could get a multi-million-dollar government contract and turn around and probably flip it and make $500,000 and pass the buck off to somebody else, and then go back to the government and say, guess what, my costs have increased, we need to amend this contract, it's going to cost $1 million more than I first said. But I mean, this is how things are being run, right? I
mean, I could live with consultants if they were supplanting hirees, right? You could say, well, okay, they're hiring temporary consultants to work on various projects instead of hiring more people, more public servants, but they're not. They're still continuing to hire like crazy, bring more people, turn a bloated civil service, public service into a complete behemoth, while at the same time spending billions of dollars on consultants. And in many cases, as you pointed out, the same workers are also on the consultant dole.
Yeah,
it's insane. It's lunacy.
I'll give you an example. So one of these consultant agencies, they did mostly work for Fisheries Canada, and that's fine, right? Small place, small contracts, $9,000. But then, they got somebody who worked for the Department of Defense to work for them. And then after that, they started getting DoD contracts. And then they got somebody who was the lead Elections Canada work for them. And then shortly after that, they started getting contracts with Elections Canada. So, like you said, it's good work if you can get it. It certainly seems like it's a nice little scheme that they've got going, right? Go work for the public service, work for a private corporation as well, and make sure that you're, getting, fed from both hands, the public and the private teat. That's great. So yeah, I mean, this is how it's going, it's, and it needs to be looked at. And I think that the real losers are that there are people out there who would love to score these government contracts, right? And there's in-house solutions, and there's great Canadian companies who are able to provide those solutions. But they're not in this, this supply arrangement system. So they're not getting these contracts. They're not the preferred contractors and things like that, right? So they don't get the offers from the government to score these contracts when they're more than capable of doing the work. And I mean, this is one of the ways when we're talking about growing the economy,
They're costing the economy. They're shrinking the private economy, right? They're growing the public economy.
If I had an option to pick something in budget 2023, I don't. Of course, I only have to, pick from about 5 or 6, 7 green choices. But this would be one of those things is to revamp how we do our supply arrangement and make sure that we're not giving up money to third-party consultants, and to make sure that we're involving Canadian businesses and Canadian tech companies in on those government contracts, so that they can benefit from them and benefit our economy and make good jobs. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I don't think the government's going to listen to you. They're certainly not going to listen to me. I don't know. Every time this stuff comes out, I just hate them more. I just can't believe how ugly and brutal and corrupt these people are. I mean, they're just like wallowing in filth. They're so awful. They're so horrible, Andy. But I just can't stand them. It's just scum.
It's so corrupt that they don't even this isn't even secretive, right? Like, this is just right out there, right? Like, I work for the government and I work for a private company that gets contracts for the government, and then we subcontract that out. Like, it's really, really
brazen. They're brazen and they're corrupt. They don't even care whether you think they're corrupt or not. It's like, whatever. They're like pigs at the, I just get this vision of Caligula or Nero, in Rome, where they're just like stuffing their faces with as much food as is humanly possible, with naked people running around. It's just debauchery at the expense of the total debauchery at the expense of the taxpayers of this country. Andy,
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it as always.
Yeah, it's good to see you again, Mark. And yeah, I'll be working on my article. Like I said, I bit off a little bit more than I was expecting to chew on here.
Okay.
So it's a work in progress. There's a lot of contracts to go through and a lot
All
of.
right. When you're ready to come on the show again, you're going to do that, right?
Yeah, I'm hoping to get a better look at just how many millions of dollars a year we're spending on third-party temporary staffing agencies.
Man, they're just such scumbags. But thank you. Appreciate it. Andy Lee. Andy Lee. All right, let's take a break. Back with more on News Talk Saga 960 and the Marc Patrone Show after.